The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sickly yellow glow across the half-empty diner. I could feel the weight of exhaustion settling into my bones like sediment at the bottom of a river, heavy, gritty, impossible to shake off. My feet throbbed in the cheap sneakers I'd bought from the thrift store 3 months ago. The soles worn so thin I could feel every crack in the linoleum floor beneath me. It was nearly midnight on a Tuesday, the kind of shift that dragged on forever while tips remained disappointingly scarce. The air smelled of burnt coffee, grease from the fryer, and something vaguely chemical from the cleaning supplies I'd used to wipe down the counter for the 3rd time that hour. Outside, rain streaked down the windows, turning the streetlights into watery halos of orange and white. I was invisible here. That's what I'd learned in the 6 months since I'd started working at Rosie's Diner. People looked through me, not at me. I was just the waitress with the faded black uniform and the name tag that read Emma in crooked letters. No one cared that I was putting myself through nursing school, or that I worked double shifts on weekends to afford the textbooks that cost more than my weekly rent. The door chimed, and I glanced up from the silverware I'd been rolling into paper napkins. 4 men walked in, their designer suits immediately out of place in this greasy spoon. They moved with the kind of confidence that comes from never being told no, their laughter too loud, their gestures too expansive. I recognized the type, young, wealthy, probably from the financial district downtown, slumming it for some ironic late-night meal. "Sit anywhere you'd like," I called out, forcing brightness into my voice that I didn't feel. They chose the large corner booth, sliding in with that careless ease of men who'd never had to worry about the cost of anything. I grabbed 4 menus and made my way over. My smile practiced and professional even as my lower back screamed in protest. "Evening, gentlemen. Can I start you off with something to drink?" The one closest to me, blonde hair slicked back, cologne so strong it made my eyes water, looked me up and down in a way that made my skin crawl. "Coffee. Black. And make it fresh, not that burnt shit you've probably had sitting there all night." I swallowed the retort that rose in my throat. "Of course. Anyone else?" They ordered. Coffee, sodas, water with extra lemon. And I retreated to the counter, my hands steady as I poured fresh coffee even though something uneasy had begun to twist in my stomach. I'd learned to trust that feeling. It usually meant trouble. When I returned with their drinks, they'd barely glanced at the menus. They ordered enough food for 8 people. Steaks, burgers, fries, onion rings, pie. The kind of excess that made me think of the $19 in my wallet that had to last until Friday. "Coming right up," I said, scribbling on my notepad. The kitchen was my sanctuary, the only place in the diner where I could drop the smile and just breathe. Miguel, the night cook, looked up from the grill and caught my expression. "Problemas?" he asked, his weathered face creased with concern. "Rich assholes," I muttered, clipping the order to the carousel. "The usual." He nodded knowingly and got to work. I leaned against the stainless steel counter for just a moment, closing my eyes, letting the sizzle of meat on the grill and the clatter of Miguel's spatula ground me. I brought out their food in waves, my arms aching from the weight of the plates. They ate like they'd been starved, talking loudly about deals and investments, and someone named Marcus who'd totally fucked up the Henderson account. I refilled drinks, brought extra napkins, smiled when they snapped their fingers at me like I was a dog. It was during one of these trips to their table that I noticed him. He sat alone in the booth by the window. So still he seemed almost like a shadow given form. I hadn't heard him come in, hadn't heard the door chime, but there he was, and the air in the diner had changed somehow. Grown thicker, more charged, like the pressure before a thunderstorm. He wore a black suit that looked like it cost more than my car, if I'd had a car. The fabric caught the light in a way that cheap material never could, tailored so precisely it seemed like a second skin. His dark hair was swept back from his face, and even though he was sitting, I could tell he was tall. Broad-shouldered, dangerous in a way I couldn't quite articulate, but it was his eyes that caught me. Even from across the diner, even in the dim lighting, they were arresting, dark and intense, fixed on me with a focus that made my breath catch. Not leering, like the men in the corner booth. Something else. Something that felt like being seen for the first time in months. A man stood near the door, I realized. Tall, built like a wall, wearing a dark suit and an earpiece, security. My pulse quickened. I grabbed a menu and approached the man by the window, very aware of my worn uniform and the coffee stain on my apron from earlier. "Good evening," I said, and was surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "Can I get you something to drink?" Up close, he was even more striking. Sharp jawline, full lips, a small scar cutting through his left eyebrow. He smelled like expensive cologne, cedar, and something darker, almost smoky. When he looked up at me, really looked at me, I felt it like a physical touch. "Coffee." His voice was deep, measured, with the barest hint of an accent I couldn't place. "Black." "I'll be right back with that." As I walked away, I could feel his gaze following me, a tangible weight between my shoulder blades. I poured his coffee with hands that had developed a slight tremor, annoyed with myself. He was just another customer, just another man in an expensive suit. But I knew that was a lie, even as I thought it. I brought him his coffee, and he nodded once, a small gesture that somehow conveyed more gratitude than all the effusive thanks I usually received. "Have you decided what you'd like to order?" "Not yet." He paused, his eyes never leaving mine. "What do you recommend?" No one ever asked me that. "The meatloaf is actually really good. Miguel, our cook, makes it with this special blend of spices, comes with mashed potatoes and green beans." The corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile, but close. "Then I'll have that." I wrote it down, feeling strangely flustered. "I'll get that in for you." The next hour passed in a blur of refills and check-ins. The men in the corner booth had finished eating and were now just lingering, their voices growing louder as they worked through several rounds of drinks. The man by the window ate slowly, methodically, occasionally glancing at a phone that looked like it cost more than my semester's tuition. The security guard never moved from his position near the door. It was almost 1 a.m. when the corner booth finally called me over. I approached with their check in hand, ready to finally be done with them. "Here you go, gentlemen, whenever you're ready." The blonde one, the one who'd ordered first, picked up the bill and looked at it like it had personally offended him. "This can't be right." My stomach dropped. "I'm sorry? These prices are insane. $42 for a steak? This is a fucking diner, not a 5-star restaurant." I kept my voice level. "Those are the menu prices, sir. The same prices listed when you ordered." "Well, they're wrong." He tossed the bill back at me. It fluttered to the floor, and I had to bend down to pick it up, my face burning. "We're not paying this." His friends laughed, and the sound scraped against my nerves like sandpaper. "Sir, I understand if there's an issue with the food or service, but the issue," he interrupted, leaning forward, "is that you're trying to scam us. What? You think because we're dressed nice we're just going to hand over whatever bullshit number you write down?" "I didn't write down any number. This is the register receipt. Are you calling me a liar?" His voice had gone cold, and something predatory flashed in his eyes. I could feel the panic rising in my chest, that familiar sensation of being trapped. Miguel had gone home 20 minutes ago. The only other person here was Linda, the night manager, who was in the back office doing paperwork. These men could walk out, and there was nothing I could do about it. The $187 tab would come out of my pay. That was rent money. That was textbook money. That was food for the next 2 weeks. "Please," I said, hating how small my voice sounded. "Please, just look at the menu. The prices are all listed. You know what I think?" The blonde man stood up, and his friends followed suit. "I think this shithole doesn't deserve our money. I think maybe we should just leave. You can't..." "Can't?" He stepped closer, invading my space, and I could smell whiskey on his breath. "Are you going to stop me, sweetheart?" I opened my mouth, but no words came out. My hands were shaking now, the receipt crumpling in my grip. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't. "There seems to be a problem." The voice came from behind me, deep, calm, and absolutely commanding. I turned to find the man from the window booth standing there, and suddenly the diner felt smaller. He wasn't particularly tall, maybe 6'1" or 6'2", but he filled the space in a way that defied physics. The security guard had moved closer, his hand resting casually on his belt, in a way that was anything but casual. The blonde man's bravado faltered for just a second before he rallied. "This doesn't concern you, buddy. Private conversation. It concerns me when 4 grown men are attempting to defraud a waitress of her wages. He said it so calmly, like he was commenting on the weather, but there was steel underneath. And when they're harassing a woman who's just trying to do her job. Look, we don't want any trouble. Then pay your bill. The temperature in the diner seemed to drop 10 degrees. The man in the black suit hadn't raised his voice, hadn't made any threatening gestures, but the blonde man actually took a step back. Who the hell do you think you are? And that's when I saw it. The moment of recognition. It flickered across the blonde man's face, then his friends, spreading like wildfire. Their complexions went pale. One of them actually swayed on his feet. The man in the black suit smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. I think, he said softly, that you know exactly who I am. Now, pay the young lady, with a 50% tip for her trouble. And then you're going to apologize. Mr. Moretti, we had no idea. Moretti. The name rang a bell somewhere in the back of my mind, but I couldn't place it. All I knew was that these men, who'd been so confident moments ago, were now fumbling for their wallets with trembling hands. The blonde man pulled out a wad of cash and thrust it at me. Here, 300. Keep the change. We're sorry. We're so sorry. I took the money mechanically, my brain struggling to process what was happening. Not to me, Mr. Moretti said quietly. To her. 4 pairs of eyes turned to me. We're sorry, they chorused, and it would have been comical if I weren't so confused. We're really sorry, miss. It won't happen again. Now leave. They practically ran for the door, stumbling over each other in their haste to escape. The security guard watched them go, then resumed his position, his expression never changing. I stood there, holding $300, my mind blank with shock. Mr. Moretti turned to me, and his expression softened incrementally. Are you all right? Yes. Thank you. I don't know what just happened, but thank you. He reached into his jacket. I flinched involuntarily and pulled out a wallet. How much was the bill? You don't have to. How much? $187. But you already helped. You don't need to. He placed $300 bills on the counter. For my meal. Keep the change. Sir, your meal was only $19. I know. His eyes held mine, and I felt that strange flutter in my chest again. You work hard. You deserve it. Before I could respond, he headed for the door. The security guard opened it for him, and they stepped out into the rain. Through the window, I watched as a black SUV, sleek, expensive, with tinted windows, pulled up to the curb. The security guard opened the back door, and Mr. Moretti slid inside. Then they were gone, and I was alone in the empty diner, holding $600 and trying to remember how to breathe. I didn't sleep that night. I'd gotten home to my studio apartment at nearly 3 a.m, my body exhausted but my mind racing like a hamster on a wheel. I kept replaying the scene in the diner, the way those men had crumbled at the mere presence of Mr. Moretti, the way his voice had cut through the tension like a blade through silk, the way he'd looked at me like I was something worth protecting. The money sat on my kitchen counter. $600 in cash. More than I made in 2 weeks. Enough to pay my rent with money left over for groceries, for the gas bill I'd been putting off, maybe even for that anatomy textbook I'd been trying to find used online. But it was the name that kept circling through my thoughts. Moretti. Why did I know that name? At 4 a.m, exhausted and wired on the coffee I'd drunk to stay alert during cleanup, I'd finally given in and Googled it. The results made my blood run cold. Dante Moretti, head of the Moretti crime family. Alleged connections to everything from racketeering to money laundering to things the articles only hinted at in vague, legally careful language. There were photos, him leaving courthouses, him at charity galas, him getting into expensive cars with tinted windows. In every single one, his expression was unreadable. His eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. The man who'd saved me was a criminal. Not just any criminal. If the articles were to be believed, he was one of the most dangerous men in the city. I should have been terrified. I should have been planning to quit my job, to move, to avoid that diner for the rest of my life on the off chance he came back. Instead, I kept remembering the way he'd said, Are you all right? The genuine concern in his voice. The fact that he could have ignored the whole situation, could have finished his meal and left, but instead, he'd stepped in. For me. A nobody waitress in a rundown diner. When my alarm went off at 11, I had a noon shift at the diner and an evening class. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. I dragged myself through a shower, pulled my hair into a ponytail, and stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, dark circles under my eyes, pale skin. The exhaustion of someone barely holding it together. Pull yourself together, Emma, I muttered. He was just a customer. He's not coming back. But my hands trembled slightly as I applied mascara. The diner looked different in daylight. Less atmospheric, more obviously run down. The vinyl on the booth seats was cracked and patched with duct tape. The walls were a dingy beige that had probably been white once. But it was familiar, and after the surreal events of last night, familiar felt safe. Emma! Linda, the manager, called out from behind the counter as I walked in. She was a woman in her 50s with bottle-red hair and a voice roughened by decades of cigarettes. Got your section set up. Oh, and some guy left this for you. She handed me an envelope, heavy cream-colored paper, expensive. My name written across the front in elegant handwriting. Emma. My heart started pounding. When? Who? About an hour ago. Big guy, looked like security or something. Didn't say a word, just handed it to me and left. Linda was watching me with undisguised curiosity. You got a secret admirer or something? Something like that, I murmured, turning the envelope over in my hands. There was no return address, no other markings. Well, don't keep me in suspense. Open it. But I couldn't. Not here. Not with Linda's eyes on me. Bathroom break first. I locked myself in the single-stall restroom, my fingers fumbling with the envelope's seal. Inside was a card. Heavy cardstock, the same expensive quality as the envelope. And something else. I pulled out the card first. The handwriting was the same as on the envelope, precise and controlled. Miss Emma, I apologize if my intervention last night caused you any distress. It was not my intention to frighten you, merely to ensure you received what you were owed. I find myself in need of someone trustworthy for a private matter. If you're interested in discussing a potential opportunity, please call the number below at your convenience. The compensation would be substantial. Respectfully, DM below was a phone number, and beneath that, folded into the card, were 5 $100 bills. $500, just like that, for nothing. I stared at the money, then at the card, then back at the money. This was insane. This was dangerous. Dante Moretti was a crime boss, and he was trying to recruit me for something. Whatever it was, it couldn't be legal. It couldn't be safe. I should throw this away. I should pretend it never happened. Instead, I tucked the card and the money into my purse and went back to work. The lunch shift passed in a blur. I took orders, delivered food, smiled at customers, all while the card seemed to burn a hole through my purse. Every time I walked past the booth by the window, his booth, I'd started thinking of it. I remembered the way he'd looked at me, seen me. My phone buzzed during my break, a text from my landlord. Rent is officially late. Need payment by Friday, or I'm starting eviction proceedings. I closed my eyes and leaned my head back against the break room wall. Friday was 3 days away. Even with the money from last night and the $500 in the card, I was cutting it close. And after rent, I'd have almost nothing left. I pulled out the card and stared at the number. The compensation would be substantial. My fingers hovered over my phone's keypad. This was stupid. This was potentially life-threatening. I should be running in the opposite direction. But I was so tired of working 70-hour weeks and still barely scraping by. Tired of choosing between textbooks and groceries. Tired of being invisible, of being one unexpected expense away from homelessness. Before I could talk myself out of it, I dialed. The phone rang once, twice. On the third ring, someone picked up. Miss Emma. That voice, deep, measured, unmistakable. Not an assistant. Him. I wasn't certain you'd call. Mr. Moretti. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Your card said you had an opportunity to discuss. I do. But not over the phone. Would you be available to meet this evening? I can send a car. A car? Of course he could send a car. Probably the same black SUV with tinted windows. I have class at 7. Before then, 6 o'clock. I'll have you back in plenty of time. I should say no. Every self-preservation instinct I had was screaming at me to hang up, block the number, forget this ever happened. Where? I heard myself ask. The car will pick you up from the diner. The driver will bring you to a safe public location. I give you my word. You'll be in no danger. The word of a crime boss. That should have been meaningless, but something in his tone made me believe him. Okay, I said quietly. 6 o'clock. Thank you, Emma. I'll see you then. He hung up before I could respond, and I sat there staring at my phone, wondering what I'd just agreed to. The afternoon dragged on interminably. I messed up orders, forgot drink refills, dropped a tray of silverware that clattered across the floor like an accusation. Linda pulled me aside at 4:30. You okay, honey? You seem distracted. Just tired, I lied. Didn't sleep well. She studied me with those sharp eyes that had seen everything in her 5 decades of waitressing. This got something to do with that envelope? It's nothing, really. She didn't believe me, but she let it go. Well, you're off at 5:30 anyway. Try to get some rest before your class. At 5:45, I was standing outside the diner in my street clothes. Jeans and a sweater. The nicest things I owned that weren't stained or threadbare. The early October evening was cool. The sun just starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. At exactly 6 o'clock, the black SUV pulled up to the curb. The back window rolled down, and I saw him. Dante Moretti, looking exactly as devastating as he had last night, his dark suit perfect, his expression unreadable, but those eyes, those intense, dark eyes, were fixed on me with that same focus that made my breath catch. The security guard from last night, the one who'd stood by the door, got out and opened the back door. Up close, he was even more imposing, easily 6'4", and built like he spent every free moment in a gym. Miss Emma, he said, his voice surprisingly soft for someone his size. I'm Marcus. I'll be driving today. I hesitated at the door, looking into the SUV's plush leather interior. This was my last chance to walk away. To choose safety over curiosity. Poverty over danger. I promise you're safe, Dante said quietly. Just a conversation. Nothing more. I took a breath and climbed in. The interior smelled like leather and that same cedar cologne he wore. The seats were heated, the windows so dark I could barely see outside. There was a privacy screen between us and the front seat, currently down so I could see Marcus getting behind the wheel. Dante was sitting on the opposite side, giving me space, but I was acutely aware of him. Of the way he filled the space, of the controlled power in the way he held himself. Thank you for agreeing to meet, he said, as Marcus pulled smoothly into traffic. I know this must seem unusual. That's one word for it. I tried to keep my voice light, but it came out shaky. Where are we going? Rosewood Park. There's a cafe there. Public. Well lit. We can talk openly. A park. A cafe. Public and safe, just like he'd promised. Some of the tension in my shoulders eased slightly. You know who I am, he said. It wasn't a question. I Googled you. No point in lying. After last night. And yet you called anyway. You're either very brave or very desperate. Maybe both, I admitted. Something flickered across his face. Respect, maybe? Honesty. I appreciate that. He shifted slightly, and I caught a glimpse of a shoulder holster beneath his jacket. The sight should have terrified me. Instead, it was almost reassuring in its honesty. He wasn't pretending to be something he wasn't. The opportunity I mentioned, he continued, requires someone trustworthy, discreet, someone who needs money but has integrity. And you think that's me? You don't even know me. I know you work 2 jobs to put yourself through nursing school. I know you stood up to 4 men last night even though you were terrified. I know you didn't steal that $300, even though you easily could have. I stared at him. How do you know about nursing school? I make it my business to know things. He said it matter-of-factly, without apology. Especially when I'm considering bringing someone into my circle, your circle. I laughed, but it sounded slightly hysterical. You mean your organization, your crime family? Yes. At least he was honest. What exactly would I be doing? Because I can't. Nothing illegal, he interrupted gently, and nothing dangerous. I simply need someone to provide medical care for individuals who can't go to a hospital. The words hung in the air between us. Medical care for people who couldn't go to hospitals. People who'd been shot, stabbed, beaten. People involved in the same world Dante inhabited. I haven't finished nursing school, I said weakly. I'm not qualified. You're in your final year. You've completed your clinical rotations. You know more than most people. His eyes never left mine. And you'd be supervised. I have a doctor on staff who can guide you for anything serious. But he can't always be available, and there are situations where we need someone with medical knowledge on hand. Why me? There are plenty of nurses you could hire. Actual licensed nurses. Because most people who work in healthcare have too much to lose. You, forgive me for being blunt, have very little, which means you're less likely to be compromised. It should have stung, but it was true. I had no family, no real friends, no career yet. I was nobody. Forgettable. Disposable. Except to him, apparently, I wasn't. How much? I asked quietly. $5,000 per month. Retainer. Whether I need your services or not. If you're called to actually provide care, it's an additional $2,000 per incident. All in cash. $5,000 per month. I was currently making maybe $2,000, working myself into an early grave across 2 jobs. That's a lot of money. It's fair compensation for the discretion required. The SUV slowed, and I realized we'd arrived at the park. Through the windshield, I could see the cafe he'd mentioned, a charming little place with outdoor seating, couples walking by, completely normal and safe. Marcus opened my door, and I stepped out on shaky legs. Dante followed, and together we walked toward the cafe. 2 of his security guards materialized from somewhere, keeping a discreet distance but clearly present. We sat at an outdoor table, and a waitress appeared almost immediately. Dante ordered an espresso. I asked for tea, not trusting myself with anything stronger. When we were alone again, he leaned forward slightly. I need an answer, Emma, but I want you to understand what you'd be agreeing to. Once you're in, you're in. You can't tell anyone about this arrangement. You can't keep records. You'll be on call, potentially at any hour, and you'll be exposed to things that may disturb you. Violence, I said. Yes. Though I'll do my best to shield you from the worst of it. I thought about my landlord's text. About the stack of unpaid bills on my kitchen counter. About the ramen noodles I'd eaten for dinner 3 nights in a row, because it was all I could afford. But I also thought about crossing a line I couldn't uncross. About becoming complicit in things I'd never be able to take back. Can I think about it? I asked. Disappointment flickered across his face, quickly masked. Of course. Take your time. He pulled out a business card, different from the one he'd left at the diner. This one with just a phone number embossed in black on black. Call me when you decide. No pressure. Our drinks arrived, and we sat in silence for a moment. The park around us was beautiful in the fading light. Children playing on swings, dogs chasing frisbees, normal life. Continuing on while I sat across from one of the most dangerous men in the city and contemplated selling my soul. Why did you help me last night? I asked suddenly. You could have just ignored it. He was quiet for a long moment, his fingers wrapped around his espresso cup. My mother was a waitress, he said finally. She worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table after my father died. I watched men treat her the way those men treated you. I swore I'd never stand by and allow it if I could prevent it. The vulnerability in his voice surprised me. This man who commanded fear with a single look, who ran a criminal empire, had just given me a piece of himself. I'm sorry about your mother, I said softly. She passed 5 years ago. Cancer. He met my eyes. She never got to see me become legitimate. That's what all this is for, ultimately. Building something that can transition out of the shadows. But that's a long road, and in the meantime, I need people I can trust. I didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to reconcile this man. Thoughtful, protective, surprisingly open, With the articles I'd read about violence and criminal enterprise, Marcus appeared at his elbow and murmured something too quiet for me to hear. Dante nodded and stood. I apologize, but I need to leave. Marcus will drive you to your class. That's not necessary. It's already done. He pulled out his wallet and left $200 bills on the table for the tea. And Emma? Whatever you decide. Thank you for meeting with me. It was a pleasure. He walked away, his security detail falling in around him, and I watched him go, my mind spinning. Marcus drove me to campus in silence, pulling up precisely at 6:53. "Have a good class, Miss Emma," he said as I got out. I walked to my anatomy lecture in a daze, barely hearing anything the professor said. The business card felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket. $5,000 a month. All I had to do was compromise every ethical principle I'd ever held. But as I sat in that lecture hall, surrounded by classmates who had parents paying their tuition and didn't have to work 3 jobs just to survive, I realized something. I'd already been compromised by poverty, by a system that made it nearly impossible to get ahead without help. At least this way, I'd be choosing my own compromise. After class, I pulled out my phone and the card. My finger hovered over the call button for a full minute. Then I dialed. He answered on the first ring. "Emma." "I'll do it," I said. "I'll work for you." There was a pause, and when he spoke I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. "I'll have Marcus pick you up tomorrow evening. We'll discuss the details then, okay? Emma? You won't regret this. I take care of people who are loyal to me." The line went dead, and I stood there in the empty parking lot, wondering what I'd just done. The next evening, Marcus picked me up at 7:30 after my shift at the diner. I'd spent the entire day in a fog of anxiety and anticipation, dropping plates, forgetting orders, jumping every time the door chimed. Linda had finally pulled me aside and asked if I was on drugs. "No," I'd said too quickly. "Just personal stuff." She'd looked at me with those knowing eyes. "Be careful, honey. Whatever it is." Now I sat in the back of the SUV, my hands twisted in my lap, watching the city pass by through tinted windows. We weren't heading to the park this time. We were going deeper into the city, toward the waterfront district where old warehouses had been converted into expensive lofts and exclusive restaurants. Marcus pulled into an underground parking garage beneath a sleek glass building. Security cameras tracked our movement. 2 men in dark suits stood by the elevator, nodding at Marcus as we passed. The elevator was all mirrors and chrome. I caught sight of myself, pale, underdressed in my jeans and sweater, looking every bit the terrified girl I was. Marcus stood beside me, silent and imposing, his eyes on the floor indicator as we climbed higher and higher. We stopped at the penthouse level. The doors opened directly into an apartment that made my breath catch. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, the lights sparkling like scattered diamonds. The space was modern and minimalist. Dark wood floors, leather furniture, art on the walls that probably cost more than my entire life was worth. And there, standing by the windows with a glass of amber liquid in his hand, was Dante. He turned when we entered, and something in his expression softened when he saw me. "Emma, thank you for coming." "Thank you for having me." It came out like a question, and I felt immediately stupid. The corner of his mouth lifted, that almost smile I was beginning to recognize. "Can I get you something to drink? Wine? Water? Water would be good." He nodded to Marcus, who disappeared into what I assumed was the kitchen. Dante gestured to the seating area. "Please sit." I perched on the edge of a leather sofa that probably cost more than my car would have if I'd had one, my hands still twisted together. Dante sat across from me, and even relaxed in his own space. There was something coiled about him, like a predator at rest, but never truly off guard. Marcus returned with a bottle of water. Expensive, imported, naturally, and handed it to me before taking up position near the elevator. Always watching. Always ready. "I want to be clear about expectations," Dante began, his dark eyes fixed on mine. "This isn't a traditional employment arrangement. You'll continue your normal life, school, your job at the diner if you wish, though you won't need to financially. But when I call, you come. Immediately. No questions. I swallowed hard. And if I'm in class? Or at work? You make an excuse and you come. I'll make it worth the inconvenience. He leaned forward slightly. The 5,000 monthly retainer starts today. I'll also provide you with a new phone. Secure line, untraceable. You keep it on you at all times. And a car. A car? My voice came out strangled. You can't be effective if you're dependent on public transportation or rideshare services. Something reliable but not flashy. A Honda or Toyota, perhaps. He said it so casually, like he was offering me a pen, not a car. That's too much. It's practical. And Emma? He waited until I met his eyes. I don't do anything that isn't practical. This isn't charity. You're providing a valuable service and I'm compensating you appropriately. Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then at Dante. They're here. Dante nodded and stood. Good. Emma, I want you to meet Dr. Reeves. He'll be your supervisor for any serious cases. He's going to assess your skills and go over protocols. The elevator doors opened, and a man in his late 50s stepped out. He was slight, with graying hair and wire-rimmed glasses, carrying a leather medical bag that looked well used. He didn't look like someone who worked for the mob. He looked like someone's kindly uncle. Dr. Reeves, Dante said. This is Emma. She'll be our new on-call medic. Dr. Reeves extended his hand, and I shook it. His grip was firm, professional. Pleasure to meet you, Emma. Dante tells me you're in nursing school. Final year? Yes, sir. I finish in May. Excellent. Well, let's see what you know, shall we? The next 2 hours were surreal. Dr. Reeves had me demonstrate basic medical procedures, taking vitals, starting an IV line, wound assessment, and cleaning. He quizzed me on drug interactions, emergency protocols, when to insist on hospital transport despite the risks. Through it all, Dante watched from the windows, his phone periodically buzzing with messages he'd glance at and dismiss. Marcus remained by the elevator, a silent sentinel. She's good, Dr. Reeves finally announced to Dante. Knows her stuff, steady hands, good instincts. With a bit more practical experience, she'll be excellent. Good. Dante turned to face us fully. Emma, Dr. Reeves will provide you with supplies, basic trauma kit, medications, everything you might need. Keep it in your car at all times. If you're called to a scene, Marcus or one of my other men will accompany you. You do not go alone. Understood? Understood. And one more thing. His expression grew serious. You will see things. Hear things. Names, faces, details of operations. None of it leaves your lips. Not to friends, not to classmates, not even to a therapist if you feel you need one. The moment you become a liability, you become a problem. And I don't want you to become a problem. The threat was clear beneath the polite words. I nodded, my mouth dry despite the water I'd been drinking. I won't say anything, I promise. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. I believe you. Marcus, take Emma home. And give her the phone and keys. Marcus produced both from seemingly nowhere. A sleek black smartphone and a set of car keys with a Honda emblem. The car's in the garage, space B17, already registered and insured in your name. I stared at the keys in my hand. This was real. This was actually happening. Thank you, I managed. For all of this. Don't thank me yet, Dante said quietly. Wait until you've actually done the work. Marcus escorted me back to the elevator. As the doors began to close, I caught one last glimpse of Dante, silhouetted against those massive windows, looking out over the city he controlled from the shadows. The car was a dark gray Honda Civic, a few years old, but in perfect condition. I sat in the driver's seat, my hands on the steering wheel, and tried to process everything that had just happened. My old phone buzzed, a text from my landlord, "Where's the rent?" I looked at the new phone Marcus had given me. Already there was a message, $5,000 deposited in your account. Account details attached. DM $5,000, just like that. I drove home in my new car, parked it on the street outside my building, and walked up to my apartment in a daze. Inside, I pulled out my laptop and checked my bank account. The money was there. All of it. I paid my rent. I paid my utilities. I bought groceries online. Real food. Not just ramen and canned soup. I ordered the textbook I'd been putting off. And then I sat on my threadbare couch and cried. Because for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't drowning. I could breathe. The new phone remained silent for 3 days. I went to class, went to my shifts at the diner, lived my normal life with this secret humming beneath my skin. The medical kit Dr. Reeves had given me sat in my car's trunk, a constant reminder. On the 4th night at 2 a.m, it rang. I jolted awake, fumbling for the phone in the darkness. Hello? Emma. Dante's voice, but different, tighter, urgent. I need you. Marcus is on his way. 5 minutes. What happened? Is someone... Just be ready. He hung up before I could respond. I threw on clothes, grabbed my medical kit, and was standing outside when the black SUV pulled up exactly 5 minutes later. Marcus didn't speak as I climbed in, just pulled into traffic with smooth efficiency. We drove for 20 minutes, leaving the familiar streets of my neighborhood for areas I'd never been. Industrial zones, warehouses, places where streetlights were few and shadows were many. We pulled up to a building that looked abandoned from the outside. Marcus got out, and I followed, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Inside was different, renovated, lit, full of people moving with purpose. And in the center of it all, on a table that had been cleared for exactly this purpose, was a man. He was young, maybe 25, his shirt soaked with blood, a bullet wound in his shoulder, bleeding heavily. Emma. Dante appeared beside me, and I saw blood on his hands, on his shirt. Not his blood. Can you handle this? I looked at the wounded man, at the blood, at the fear in his eyes. Every instinct I had screamed that I should run, should get out of here, should call the police. But I'd made a choice, and people didn't walk away from Dante Moretti once they were in. Yes, I heard myself say. I can handle it. I stepped forward, opened my kit, and got to work. The bullet had gone clean through, which was the only good news about the situation. I worked quickly, my training overriding my panic. Clean the wound, check for arterial damage, apply pressure. Start an IV for fluids. My hands didn't shake. That surprised me more than anything. His name is Tommy, Dante said quietly from beside me. He'd positioned himself where he could watch both me and the door. He's 23. Works in my shipping operations. Tommy, I said, looking into the young man's terrified eyes. I'm Emma. I'm going to help you, okay? This is going to hurt, but I need you to stay still. He nodded, teeth gritted against the pain. Someone had given him something to bite down on. A leather belt, I realized with a sick twist in my stomach. Like something out of a western. Dr. Reeves had taught me well. I irrigated the wound, checking carefully for any debris or fabric. The entry and exit wounds were clean, the bullet missing anything vital by what looked like inches. Lucky. He was incredibly lucky. He needs antibiotics, I said, not looking up from my work. And he should really be in a hospital. If this gets infected... No hospitals, Dante said firmly. Can you handle it? I thought about the bottles in my kit, the broad-spectrum antibiotics Dr. Reeves had insisted I carry. Yes, but he needs to be monitored. Someone needs to check on him every few hours, watch for fever, signs of infection. I'll arrange it. Dante's phone was already out, his fingers moving across the screen. I worked for another 40 minutes, cleaning and dressing both wounds, administering pain medication and antibiotics, setting up the IV. Around me, men moved in and out, their voices low, their eyes occasionally flicking to where I worked. I felt their assessment, their judgment. The new girl, the outsider, the liability. When I finally stepped back, my hands were covered in blood, Tommy's blood, and I was shaking. Not from fear, I realized, from adrenaline crash. You did well, Dante said softly. He handed me a towel, and I wiped my hands mechanically. Very well. He needs rest, pain management, those antibiotics every 6 hours. My voice sounded strange, clinical, like someone else was speaking through me. And if he develops a fever over 101, or if there's increasing redness or discharge from the wounds, he needs a hospital regardless of the risk. Understood. Dante gestured to two men I hadn't noticed. Get Tommy to the safe house. Make sure he's comfortable. Emma's instructions are to be followed exactly. They moved Tommy carefully, lifting him on what I now saw was a proper stretcher. Professional. Organized. This wasn't the first time they'd dealt with something like this. That thought should have terrified me. Instead, I felt oddly numb. Come, Dante said, his hand warm on my lower back. You need to clean up. He led me through the warehouse to a small office space. Inside was a bathroom, surprisingly clean, well-stocked. He gestured me in, then waited outside while I scrubbed Tommy's blood from under my fingernails, watching the water run pink in the sink. When I emerged, he was leaning against the wall, his jacket removed, his shirt still stained with blood. He looked tired in a way I hadn't seen before. Human. What happened? I asked quietly. To Tommy? Wrong place, wrong time. A rival crew tried to hit one of our operations. Tommy got caught in the crossfire. His jaw tightened. They'll regret it. The casual promise of violence should have made me recoil. Instead, I just felt exhausted. Marcus will take you home, Dante continued. There's a bonus in your account, $10,000 for tonight, $10,000 for an hour's work. I should have been grateful. Instead, I felt sick. I don't want it. He looked at me sharply. What? The bonus. I don't want it. The retainer is enough. I met his eyes. That boy, Tommy, he's just a kid. He almost died tonight. I don't want to profit from that. Something shifted in Dante's expression. Surprise, maybe. Or respect. Emma, please, my voice cracked. Just let me do this one decent thing. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. But you still did excellent work tonight. No bonus. Thank you. Marcus appeared then, ready to drive me home. I followed him out in silence, too drained to speak. As we reached the SUV, I heard Dante's voice behind me. Emma. I turned. He stood in the warehouse doorway, backlit so his face was in shadow. You're stronger than you think. Remember that. The drive home passed in a blur. I showered until the water ran cold, scrubbing at skin that felt contaminated despite the blood being long gone. Then I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment. I'd just helped a criminal. I'd provided medical care to someone who'd been shot in gang violence. I'd crossed a line I could never uncross. But Tommy was alive because of me. That had to count for something, didn't it? Sleep, when it finally came, was restless and filled with blood. The next 2 weeks fell into a strange rhythm. I went to classes, worked my shifts at the diner, though I'd cut back to just 3 days a week now that money wasn't desperate. I studied. I slept. I lived a normal life, except for the phone. The secure line that stayed charged and close, always waiting. It rang 4 more times, twice for minor injuries, cuts that needed stitches, a broken finger that needed setting. Once for an overdose that I managed to reverse with naloxone, my hand steady even as the man convulsed on the floor, and once for nothing, a false alarm, a panic over what turned out to be a bad case of food poisoning. Each time I went. Each time Dante was there, watching me work with those intense dark eyes. Each time he thanked me quietly, ensured I had what I needed, sent me home safely. And each time, I felt the distance between my two lives growing wider. At school, I smiled and took notes, and pretended I was just like everyone else. At the diner, I served coffee and made small talk with regulars. But underneath, I carried secrets that would destroy me if they ever came to light. I was good at it, I realized. The compartmentalization. Maybe too good. It was a Thursday afternoon when everything changed. I was at the diner, refilling salt shakers during a slow period, when my regular phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. Hello? Is this Emma Foster? A woman's voice, professional. Yes, this is Catherine Mills from Mercy General Hospital. We have a patient here who listed you as an emergency contact. A Thomas Brennan? My blood ran cold. Tommy. Is he okay? What happened? He came in with a fever and infection. We've got him on IV antibiotics, and he's stable now. But he was asking for you. Are you family? I'm a friend. My mind raced. I'll be there as soon as I can. I told Linda I had a family emergency, not technically a lie, and drove to the hospital. My heart pounded the entire way. How had Tommy ended up there? What had gone wrong? And did Dante know? I found Tommy in a room on the 4th floor, hooked up to monitors and IVs, looking pale but alive. His eyes lit up when he saw me. Emma, you came. Of course I came. I moved to his bedside, automatically checking his vitals even though the machines were doing that. What happened? Why are you here? The fever wouldn't break. The guys at the safe house got scared and brought me in. He grabbed my hand weakly, but I didn't tell them anything. About you. About Mr. Moretti. About what really happened. I said I got mugged, got shot by some random guy. They believed me. Good. That's good. But my mind was spinning. The doctors would have seen the wound care, the professional treatment. They'd know someone with medical knowledge had helped him initially. I wanted to thank you, Tommy continued, for saving my life. Mr. Moretti told me what you did. How you could have walked away but didn't. I'm glad you're okay. He cares about you, you know, Mr. Moretti. I've worked for him for 3 years, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. My stomach flipped. Tommy, you're on pain medication. You're not thinking clearly. I know what I see. He's different around you, softer. Before I could respond, my secure phone buzzed, a text from Dante. Where are you? My hands trembled as I typed back. Mercy General. Tommy's here. Infection got bad. The response came immediately. Stay there. I'm coming. He's on his way. I told Tommy. Good. Tommy's eyes were already drifting closed, the medication pulling him under. You're good for him, Emma. Don't let him push you away. I sat with Tommy until he fell asleep, my mind churning. Dante looked at me differently. What did that even mean? 30 minutes later, I heard his voice in the hallway. Low, controlled, but unmistakably his. I stepped out of Tommy's room and found him with Marcus and another man I didn't recognize, talking to a doctor in a white coat. When Dante saw me, something in his expression shifted. Relief, maybe. He excused himself and walked over, and I was suddenly aware of how I must look. Rumpled, tired, worried. Is he all right? He asked quietly. Yes. They caught the infection in time. He'll be fine. Thank God. He ran a hand through his hair, and I realized he'd been genuinely worried. Not about exposure or complications. About Tommy. About a 23-year-old kid who worked in his organization. Did you know he listed me as his emergency contact? I asked. No, I didn't. Dante's jaw tightened. That was foolish of him. It creates a connection between you and this situation, maybe. But it also saved his life. We stood there in the fluorescent hospital hallway, and I saw him clearly for perhaps the first time. Not a crime boss. Not a dangerous man. Just someone trying to protect his people. The weight of responsibility visible in the set of his shoulders. Come on, he said finally. I'll have Marcus drive you home. You look exhausted. My car's here. I'll have someone bring it to your apartment tomorrow. You shouldn't be driving right now. He was right. I was running on fumes. I nodded and let him guide me out, his hand resting lightly on my lower back, a touch that felt protective rather than possessive. In the SUV, I leaned my head back and closed my eyes. I felt Dante slide in beside me, closer than usual. Felt the warmth of him, the solid presence. Emma, he said quietly, and I opened my eyes to find him watching me with an intensity that made my breath catch. Tommy was right. What you did, coming here, checking on him when you didn't have to, that says something about who you are. I'm just a waitress who couldn't afford rent, I said tiredly. Not some kind of hero. You're more than you give yourself credit for. His hand found mine in the darkness, his fingers warm and strong, much more. And there, in the back of that SUV with the city lights streaming past, something fundamental shifted between us. Something dangerous, something inevitable. The weeks that followed were a study in contradiction. I lived 2 lives, and the line between them blurred more each day. By day, I was Emma Foster, nursing student, Part-time waitress. Nobody special. I studied for exams, worked my shifts at Rosie's, grabbed coffee with classmates who complained about homework and dating and normal, mundane things. By night, I belonged to Dante's world. The calls came regularly now, not always for medical emergencies, but for other things. He'd ask me to meet him for dinner at restaurants where the waiters knew his name, and the private rooms in the back were never questioned. He'd send Marcus to drive me to his penthouse, where we'd talk for hours about everything and nothing. My childhood in foster care, his memories of his mother, the books we'd read, the dreams we'd had before life got complicated. He never touched me beyond that initial hand-holding in the SUV, never crossed the line into something more. But the tension between us grew like a living thing, heavy and electric, until I could barely breathe when we were in the same room. "You're playing with fire," Linda told me one afternoon at the diner. She'd cornered me in the back, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "Whatever you're mixed up in with that man, the one in the expensive suits who keeps sending cars for you, it's going to burn you." "I'm being careful," I said. "Careful." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Honey, I've been around long enough to recognize a woman falling in love with danger, and that's exactly what you're doing." I wanted to deny it, but the words stuck in my throat because she was right. I was falling for Dante Moretti, falling for a man who ordered violence with the same ease most people ordered coffee, a man whose hands had blood on them, whose empire was built on things I didn't want to think about too closely. But I was also falling for the man who remembered how I took my tea, who'd set up a college fund for Tommy after he recovered, who called me at midnight just to hear my voice when he couldn't sleep, who looked at me like I was something precious and rare, instead of disposable. It was dangerous. It was stupid. It was inevitable. Everything came to a head on a cold November night, 6 weeks after I'd first agreed to work for Dante. The call came at 11 p.m. Not Dante's voice this time. Marcus's, tight with urgency. "Emma, we need you. Now. It's bad." I was in the SUV within minutes, my medical kit clutched to my chest, my heart racing. Marcus drove like a man possessed, weaving through traffic, running red lights. We weren't going to the warehouse. We were going to Dante's penthouse. The elevator ride up felt like it took hours. When the doors opened, I stepped into chaos. Blood on the floor, men shouting. And there, on that expensive leather sofa, was Dante. He was conscious, which was good, but there was so much blood, a gash across his ribs, deep enough that I could see muscle. His shirt was shredded, his face pale but his eyes still sharp, still aware. "Emma." His voice was strained. "Sorry to ruin your evening." "Shut up." I dropped to my knees beside him, my hands already moving, assessing. "What happened?" "Ambush. Knife." He winced as I pressed gauze to the wound. "The other guy looks worse. I don't care about the other guy." My voice came out sharper than I intended, fear making me harsh. "This needs stitches. A lot of stitches. And you might have internal bleeding. No hospital. Dante." "No. Hospital." He grabbed my wrist, his grip still strong despite the blood loss. "Please, Emma. I'm trusting you." I looked into those dark eyes and saw the truth there. Going to a hospital meant questions, police, exposure, the unraveling of everything he'd built. "Fine." I pulled out my phone, the secure one, and called Dr. Reeves. "But I'm getting backup." Dr. Reeves arrived 20 minutes later, and together we worked on Dante. The wound was deep but clean. No internal bleeding that we could detect. No nicked organs. Lucky. He was so incredibly lucky. I stitched him up with steady hands while Dante watched me, never looking away, even when I knew it must have hurt terribly. Dr. Reeves monitored vitals, administered pain medication, double-checked my work. "Excellent suturing," he murmured approvingly. "You've got real talent, Emma," but I barely heard him. All I could focus on was Dante's face, the paleness of his skin, the way his breathing was too shallow. When we were finally done, Dr. Reeves packed up his supplies. "He needs rest. No strenuous activity for at least 2 weeks. The stitches come out in 10 days. Emma can do that." He looked between us, something knowing in his expression. "I'll leave you two alone. Call if anything changes." Then it was just us. Marcus had cleared out the other men, posted guards at the elevator, given us privacy. The penthouse was silent, except for the sound of our breathing. "You're angry," Dante said quietly. I'm terrified. I sank into the chair beside the sofa, suddenly exhausted. You could have died tonight, if that knife had been 2 inches to the left. But it wasn't. That's not the point. My voice broke. You can't keep doing this, putting yourself in danger like you're invincible. You're not invincible, Dante. You're human. You bleed. You can die, I know. He shifted, wincing, and reached for my hand. This time I let him take it. Emma, I need to tell you something. If it's about the ambush, it's about you. His thumb traced circles on my palm, the gesture somehow more intimate than anything we'd shared before. From the moment I saw you in that diner, standing up to those men even though you were terrified, I knew you were different, special. And every day since, you've proven me right. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. Dante, let me finish. His eyes held mine, dark and intense, and vulnerable in a way I'd never seen. I've done terrible things, Emma. I've hurt people. I've made choices I can't take back. I'm not a good man. But when I'm with you, I want to be. You make me want to be better. You are better, I whispered. You're loyal to your people. You protect them. You saved me when you didn't have to. That counts for something. Does it? He pulled me closer, and I went willingly, perching on the edge of the sofa beside him. Does it count enough for you to forgive what I am? What I do? I thought about that, about the violence I'd witnessed, the people I'd treated for injuries sustained in his world, about the lines I'd crossed, the complicity I'd accepted, but I also thought about Tommy, alive because Dante had called me. About the single mother I'd met at one of his warehouses, whose medical bills Dante had paid without being asked, about the way he looked at me like I mattered. I'm already in too deep to pretend I'm innocent, I said finally. We both know that. The question is whether I'm okay with that. Whether I can live with the choices I've made. And can you? I looked at him. Really looked at him. At the man behind the reputation. The son who'd loved his mother. The leader who cared for his people. The complex, contradictory, dangerous man who'd somehow become essential to me. Yes, I said. I can. Because those choices led me to you. Something blazed in his eyes. Relief. Desire. Something deeper. Emma, I kissed him. Leaned forward and pressed my lips to his, cutting off whatever he'd been about to say. For a moment he froze, surprised. Then his hand came up to cup my face and he kissed me back with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with everything I knew about him. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathing hard. That was unexpected, he murmured, his thumb tracing my cheekbone. You almost died tonight. Life's too short for expected. He laughed. Actually laughed. The sound rusty but genuine. I suppose it is. Then his expression grew serious again. Emma, if you do this, if you choose me, there's no going back. My world is dangerous. The people who want to hurt me will try to use you to do it. I can protect you, but I can't guarantee your safety. And I can't promise that loving me won't destroy you. Loving you? My heart stuttered on the words. Yes. No hesitation. Because that's what this is, isn't it? Why else would you be crying right now? I reached up and realized my cheeks were wet. When had I started crying? I don't know when it happened, I admitted. Somewhere between you saving me from those men and me stitching you up tonight. But yes, I love you. Even though I probably shouldn't, even though it's insane. It is insane. He pulled me closer, careful of his injury, until I was curled against his uninjured side. But I love you too. Have for weeks now. I just didn't think I had the right to say it. We stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in each other, the city lights twinkling through the windows. I could hear his heartbeat, steady and strong beneath my ear. Alive. He was alive. What happens now? I asked quietly. Now? His fingers traced patterns on my shoulder. Now I take you to dinner tomorrow night. Somewhere fancy where I can show you off. I buy you flowers and jewelry and all the things you deserve. I introduce you to my inner circle as the woman I'm serious about. And I spend every day trying to be worthy of you. You don't have to buy me things. I want to. Let me spoil you, Emma. Let me give you everything you've been denied. He pressed a kiss to my hair. You've spent your whole life taking care of everyone else. Let me take care of you for a change. The offer should have felt like a trap, like giving up my independence. Instead, it felt like safety, like home. Okay, I whispered. Okay. 6 months later, I stood in that same penthouse, looking out at a city that felt like it belonged to us. I'd graduated nursing school with honors. I'd quit the diner, though I still saw Linda occasionally for coffee, carefully editing the details of my new life. I'd moved into Dante's penthouse 2 months ago, my threadbare belongings looking absurd in all that luxury, until he'd taken me shopping and replaced everything. The medical calls still came, but less frequently now. Dante was working on making his operations more legitimate, slowly transitioning away from the things that required my particular services. It was a long process, he'd explained, but it was happening. I heard him come in before I saw him. The sound of the elevator doors, Marcus's low voice reporting something. Then Dante's footsteps approaching, his arms wrapped around me from behind, and I leaned back into his warmth. Good day, he murmured against my hair. Great day. I got the job offer from Mercy General. They want me in their ER. He spun me around, his face lit with genuine joy. Emma, that's incredible. I'm so proud of you. I couldn't have done it without you. The extra studying time, the practical experience, you did this yourself. I just made sure you had what you needed to succeed. He cupped my face in his hands. You're extraordinary. Do you know that? I smiled up at him, this dangerous man who'd become my everything. Only because you make me believe it. He kissed me then, deep and sweet and full of promise. When we pulled apart, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. My breath caught. Dante, I know we haven't been together long, he said, dropping to one knee despite the expensive suit. And I know I'm not the kind of man you probably dreamed of marrying. But Emma Foster, you saved me in more ways than you know. You saw past what I am to who I could be. And I want to spend the rest of my life being that man for you. Will you marry me? I should have thought about it. Should have considered the implications, the danger, the complexity of binding my life to his. But I'd learned something in these past months. Sometimes the most dangerous choice is also the right one. Yes, I said, tears streaming down my face. Yes, I'll marry you. He slipped the ring on my finger, a simple diamond, elegant and perfect, and stood to kiss me again. Through the windows, the city sparkled beneath us, full of possibilities and second chances. I'd walked into Dante Moretti's world expecting darkness. What I found instead was a complicated, flawed, deeply human man who loved me with a fierceness that took my breath away. A man who'd been shaped by violence but was choosing, every day, to be something more. We weren't perfect. Our love story wasn't conventional. But it was ours, built on trust and honesty and the strange alchemy that happens when two broken people find each other and decide to heal together. As Dante held me close, I thought about the terrified waitress I'd been 6 months ago, invisible and struggling. She seemed like a different person now. Because I was different. Stronger. More confident. Loved. No regrets? Dante asked softly, as if reading my thoughts. I looked at the ring on my finger, then up at the man who'd given it to me. The mob boss who'd become my savior, my partner, my home. Not a single one, I said, and meant it with every fiber of my being. Outside, the city glittered like scattered diamonds, full of danger and beauty and endless possibility, and inside, in the warmth of Dante's arms, I was finally, truly free.